Operation Twin Shells is bringing with it a lot of various balancing changes to a whole host of different operators, and today we're going to cover all of the nerfs and buffs coming to Rainbow Six Siege when the season drops. Some of these are pretty direct changes, but some are a little more unexpected, so be sure to stick around for the full list. Just like last time, we're going to alternate between nerfs and buffs throughout the video, and let's kick things off with a buff coming to Nøkk. Nøkk is receiving a gadget overhaul this season, in the form that her gadget's meter will now no longer deplete unless you are performing certain actions, meaning that so long as you are walking or crouch walking without doing anything that would make you appear on cameras as a glitch, you can essentially have your gadget active indefinitely. Due to this, it is now the case that her gadget meter now takes a whole 2 minutes to fully recharge, but as we've discussed, since you can have it active without actually depleting it, I doubt that will be awfully impactful. On top of this, her FMG9 is receiving a reduction in recoil to make it easier to use with zoomed optics. This is especially good for those wanting to run a suppressor on her but had to run the flash hider to mitigate the recoil. And of course, since this weapon is also on smoke, this counts as a buff for him as well. Moving on over to the nerfs side, we have Ash and Ram. This comes in the form of a reduction in magazine size to their R4C. Ubisoft cites this as being done in order to push more players towards these characters' other weapon options, that being the G36C and the LMGE respectively. This is quite a shame for Ram especially, as based on the patch notes it certainly seems like this was more so directed towards Ash, and yet Ram has found herself in the crossfire for sharing the same rifle. The R4C now has 25 bullets in each mag, with a total of 26 with one in the chamber. This also means they now have a total of 30 less bullets in reserve ammo, so you guys better start hitting your shots. Back over to the buffs, we have drone operators, those being Twitch, Brava, Echo, and Mozzie. All of these characters' drones, as well as standard attacker drones, are now receiving the option to have a boost in speed to help them evade being shot, or even just to get them into better hiding places. Now, you could count this as a buff to all of the attackers, which I suppose technically it is, but clearly the characters whose gadgets depend on drones will benefit far more from this change. It's also worth it to note that I did not mistakenly miss out Flores, it's just his drones will not be receiving this speed option for obvious reasons. Quite possibly the most infamous nerf of this patch is Solis, as she is receiving yet another heavy nerf even after the changes she saw last season, and there's quite a few, so buckle in for this. Firstly, only the center oval of Solis' scanner UI will now be able to see and display gadgets, whereas formerly the entire screen could. Next is that the identity of the gadgets that she can see will be hidden until Solis uses a new feature called overclocking. Overclocking is essentially a redesign of the former scan mechanic, which once used will identify the gadgets in her vision for 10 seconds. Solis only gets 3 of these overclocks, and to make it worse, the latter 2 of which only generate progressively throughout the round every 25 seconds. But that's not all, because any observation tool that is identified by Solis' overclock now displays a warning to anyone who was watching it, letting them know that they were pinged by a nearby Solis. Ubisoft truly have stripped Solis of her former power. I absolutely despised going against Solis, but even I can recognize that this is far too harsh, and I don't want to say it, but she might be genuinely useless now. On a slightly lighter note, there's a very tiny buff coming to Aruni next season. Next season brings a relatively small nerf to Dokkaebi. Currently, Dokkaebi starts with 2 calls ready to use from the very start of the round. However, next season, instead she will start with no calls and passively generate them every 45 seconds. This should help to mitigate some frustrating rush strategies with Dokkaebi, and honestly might actually help some new players stop wasting her calls too quickly. It's also important to note that Ubisoft says that this is intended as a short-term adjustment to Dokkaebi, and that something more substantial will be coming in the future at some point down the line. Claymores, and by extension every character that uses them, is receiving a buff in Twin Shells, as the short 0.2 second delay between triggering a Claymore and it detonating is being removed. So now you will have less time to pre-fire a Claymore when jumping out of a window, and the ability to bait Claymores by triggering them and quickly running away is now seemingly impossible. I think placing Claymores in drone holes is now also going to be a hell of a lot more effective, since a lot of the time you can just sprint straight past and evade the explosion, whereas now that's seemingly going to be impossible. Obviously this will benefit some characters more than others, and so I think characters revolving around window plays such as Blackbeard and Osa will be benefiting the most from this change. Sticking with secondary gadgets, the proximity alarm, and once again by extension all of the characters that can run it, is getting a slight nerf. This is because the points that would show up on your screen when one of your alarms was triggered is now being removed, meaning that you and your teammates will have to rely solely on the sound alone. This affects all characters who use prox alarms heavily in their strats, but by far the worst affected is Sentry, since they could formerly use the points on their screen to know when to detonate pre-placed nitrocells. In fact, this very strategy is being cited by Ubisoft as the sole reason for this change being made. So all of you who use procs alarm points to your advantage can blame Sentry for this one. We already mentioned earlier that Smoke is getting a nice reduction in recoil on his FMG9, but he's also technically receiving another slight buff along with Fenrir. This comes in the form of Scopos. Scopos' shells are the only other characters in the game, besides Smoke and Fenrir, who don't suffer the effects of each character's respective gas. So now each of these characters have a buddy who can push through the smoke with them and not take any damage or suffer the near sight effect. You might think that's a little bit of a stretch to call that one a buff to those characters, and I would agree, I am certainly scraping the barrel here, but just wait until you hear this final nerf. The final nerf of this video doesn't actually come to any of the operators, and instead comes to all PC players who would play the game on the Vulkan API, since that is being removed next season. For context for console players, when booting up the game on PC, you are prompted to choose which graphics API you'd like to run the game in. Vulkan, for a lot of players, was a way to get a better and more consistent frame rate on certain PC hardware, and well, the option for that is being removed and replaced with DirectX 11 and DirectX 12. I'm not a computer guy, I have no idea what that means. I don't know if it's gonna blow up my PC when I try and run it, but I just thought I'd put that out there. But that is all of the nerfs and buffs that I could find coming in Operation Twin Shells. If you enjoyed this video, then please do remember to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It is very much appreciated. I am once again sorry for disappearing for like 2 months. I did not want to make videos about Operation New Blood, as I'm sure you can imagine, but I am back now and I am never leaving again, I promise. Thank you all for watching. I will catch you all in the next one.